Hey guys, this is Danny. I've created a Mosaic script which I've called FlipMaster, which does like a flip-flop effect, like a radio button selection for different nodes in AUM. You'll see here that CC0 is controlling everything in channel 1, CC1 is controlling channel 2, CC3 is channel 4, and I've got an extra one which isn't being used, which actually turns them all off because it's as though you've selected. But that's just a quick example. I'm going to take you through the setup and then a few other examples of how you can use this. So let's get started. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up an exclusive group to switch between these two channels. So I need an instance of Mosaic, and in there I've already saved it in here, so I've got FlipMaster. Now the CC offset changes the CC number that's being used by this group. In this case it's 0 to 3 for 4. Let's say we want two switches, so 0 and 1. If you use multiple instances of FlipMaster and you want multiple groups that do different things, then just make sure they're on different CCs to each other, because the automation Midi control lane in AUM is global. So they'll all be talking into the Midi control, so they all need exclusive CCs or exclusive channels. Now, if you don't want to flip through CCs, you can also go up to 16 channels, and that will send the Midi out from Mosaic's instance to a particular channel. So if you want to keep it on 0 and 1, just make sure that you've got exclusive channels at least. Flipping I'll go into in a minute, and the number of pads goes up to 16, so you can have a group of different 16 different channels or node groups being selected in a single instance. And what this does is when you select one, it sends its maximum value, which is 127, and it sends everything else its minimum value. So what we need to do, I'm going to set Mosaic to Midi control, which means now it can be used for automation. And then I'm going to go into this and, for example, create a bypass. Now, just think about a bypass. It took me a minute to figure out what was going on. Basically, bypass is off when it's engaged. So when you send it a 127, it's going to be off. Whereas in my mind, I wanted it to, when I click the button, I wanted it to be on. So you might want to invert this, but if you're only using binary nodes that are switching on and off, it's a bit of a pain to go invert. So let's not for now, and I'll explain why in a sec. So I'll do the same thing here. I'll click bypass on CC1. Just make sure I did this right because I was talking. This should be CC0. Okay, cool. Oh, there's a nice alarm for someone walking around outside. So, so what you'll notice is when I'm hitting CC1, it's actually disengaging it, and when I hit CC0, it disengages it. So there's a universal flip button here, which means you can basically correct it without having to go through inverting all of your nodes on and off. So if you're only using exclusive groups, you can do that. Now, another thing which I'll quickly just show you is that if you control volume, for example, now this is where you're going to have to start inverting things, because if I want the volume to be controlled by CC0 as well, they're going to be at odds with each other. So it will mix it down while the channel is mixed up. So let me just show you that. Channel 1, CC1. Okay, now, so as it brings in the node, it brings the volume down to 0. So one of these things is going to have to give, and you're going to have to change one of these to be inverted on both instances. Essentially, they're doing the same thing, so you actually don't need to do a node bypass, but it's actually important for you to know that that is what is happening. And now they're actually working correctly. So, no, in fact, they're working inverted because I've got it flipped. So I've now unflipped it, and now it should work as expected. So CC0 brings the volume up and engages the node. Now, the other thing that's useful to do here is if you press Shift and then press a button, you'll see it goes red, and the minimum and maximum value, which is by default set to 0 and 127, has been changed, can be changed. So if you want this to be at a minimum of, say, 30 when it's off, and a maximum of 100 when it's on, and that's only for CC number 1. If you do that, this is going from, if you look at the first channel, it's going from max to min. But if you look at the second channel, it's actually going from not max to not min, based on that value. So if I do the same for CC1 and I want it to go inverted, for example, you can invert, so you can make them do different things. So it's just to give you more options to make it more versatile. So that's basically it with all the settings. I've got a couple of examples that I've set up. So someone was talking about using it like a guitar pedal, where you've got different channels with a bunch of different effects, but obviously when they're disengaged, you're saving DSP. So what I've done is I've just set all of these in the same channel to use CC0, CC1 and CC2, and you can disengage them all. The downside with this is that you don't, if you've got reverbs or something like that, when they disengage, and you'll notice I didn't fix the volume to be reversed while the others are, so ignore that for now. But if you've got reverbs or something like that you want the tails to be not disengaged, then you need to set it up like my second example, which uses buses. So with this, I've got 3 channels that are going through buses, and you might have a reverb in one, a delay in the other, things that have got long tails, and you might have your guitar or synth or whatever going into channel 1. These are just swapping exclusively bus 1, 2, and 3. And that means that when you disengage bus A and go to bus B, the signal's still going to be running through the plugins, and you'll still get the tails from the second channel. So if you want to end a track through a massive delay, you can just disengage the input, but still have the delay going, or whatever you wish. Now, same thing with this is, if I change the minimum and maximum value, is what we can do is the maximum I still want to be high, but I don't want the minimum to be 0. So I'm going to just set that up. And what that will do is it will mean that instead of actually disengaging fully, you can have it mixing in different ways through different channels. So if you still want some reverb and you still want some delay, but you don't want quite so much, so you can set up different levels of mix bus in order to do that. So my final example is to do with Midi, and although you can use the same as my first example to disengage channels, what happens is, for the same reason, if a synth has got a long tail on it, you need to actually disengage the input to the synth rather than the synth itself. So I've set up a instance of cycle here, which is going to it's a similar thing to having an external hardware input going into all these different synths, which is another example someone mentioned the other day. So you'll see that as you go to 1, 2, and 3, you've got a mix bus, a MIDI bus, sorry, which is going, MIDI bus A is going to the first instance, B is going to the second, C is going to the third, and I've got my one controller going to all of those. So instead of sending the controller directly to the synths, because then I couldn't disengage it, I've got MIDI buses that are going through to the different synths. So if I play that and show an example, you probably can't hear that, I don't know, because I've got my microphone plugged in, but I'll have to check, and if not, I'll splice in a quick example of the end of this. So I'll stop this now. So yeah, so C is controlling the third instance here, and that has a long delay on it. So you should see in the example, which I'll record again after this, that number 3, when you disengage it, you still hear the delay going on. So hopefully this is useful, and let me know if you have any issues, and have fun. Cheers.